The MMO genre is one of the most lucrative in the gaming industry. From World of Warcraft to Final Fantasy XIV, these are some of the most successful games in history. Yet because of this goldmine for a successful title, it is also a graveyard for a plethora of failed, defunct, or dead games that just never quite made it. You see, the biggest rewards in life are often closely followed by the worst disasters, and the line between the two is oh so fine. But Bitbox had big dreams, a full medieval survival games mixed with MMO elements to bring together thousands of players in one persistent map. Growing cities, waging war and making alliances to recreate a time of old within their newest endeavor. Life is feudal. But the developers Bitbox oversaw one big thing. One big thing that would end up killing their beloved game. This is the sad death of the Life is Feudal MMO.
I think the first major sign that Life is Feudal was in trouble was the fact that it was voiced by Sean Bean.
Yes, definitely.
As soon as you hear that voiceover, you're like, something's going to die.
Founded in 2011, Bitbox Limited, like many, had this utopian idea for the perfect historical MMO. But first, they wanted to test it out on a smaller scale version disguised as a regular medieval survival. This went by the name of Life is Feudal Your Own. Releasing in 2014, it was the first in a complete medieval multiplayer survival genre, or at least at the time the most notable. Starting out as an early access version, boasting hardcore realistic survival mechanics with complete crafting, skill trees and terraforming. Building palisades for your small village, to castle walls and eventually huge cities that stood as landmarks across vast landscapes. And there was also the running away from countless wolves as you were mauled and having to start your long trek to safety all over again, but we'll ignore that for now. As mentioned, Life is Feudal Your Own wasn't an MMO at this point. It was a 64-player server game with a 3km by 3km map. Big, yes, but nothing on the scale of what we would see in a few years' time from the Bitbox development team. Speaking of the team, during this moment in time, around its release in 2014 to 2015, the game had around 4 or 5 main devs working on the title, with a total team of about 13 members. It was a small studio at that, and never the AAA title that many people assumed it was, but it was clear there was still a lot of talent behind this game. Life is Feudal Your Own was received well at the time, with good to very good reviews all round. People seemed to really enjoy what Bitbox had created here. After people playing a lot of Rust and Ark, people wanted a survival that really embraced that medieval world, and like many historical fans, realism was key, or so we thought. You see, many of these historical fans, and many fans in general, including me, fall into the same traps of thinking something might work because it sounds like it would work and it sounds like an amazing idea in your head, but practically speaking, it just doesn't. And it's no more relevant than realism in historical games. With many positive reviews and a lot of hours sunk into this title, there was one thing that started to become very clear with Life is Feudal Your Own. It was not a play on your own kind of game. Taking to the world as a solo character was begging for disaster, with tree planting that would take hours and hours of real-time length to grow, house building that took real-life days set aside to complete, and a monument system that took hours and hours of grinding for the exact right herbs in order to build it. Not only this, but harvesting for said herbs needed to be done at a high enough level, and these herbs themselves were completely randomized, giving players only luck to decide whether it took them 2 hours to build this monument or 2 days. And by the way, this was no optional thing either. The monument was the only way in Life is Feudal Your Own to save your gear, to stop others from looting and griefing your stuff, or even just the server over time disintegrating your houses in order to keep it nice and clean. These things, as I mentioned, already took weeks and weeks and hours of your time to be put into, and then having to add that on just to make an item that would save all your work. It was almost at that point like a real life job. And look, whilst I'm looking at this as more of a negative, it actually, for Life is Feudal Your Own, works kind of fine in that game. But it walked the line between realism and grindiness. But at least Life is Feudal was just about on the right side of that line. at least for now. Soon after the success, Bitbox announced they were going to release a new version of the title, Life is Feudal MMO, a similar game to your own but on a much larger scale, taking a 3 square kilometer map to a humongous 9 square kilometer, a scale that no one really expected for this, boasting that this map could fill up to 10,000 players at once and everybody would be playing in the same world, split into grids that would be separate servers but could be traversed as naturally as you would walk to any other place on a map. And this is where the danger started to set in. You see, whilst most people, including me, got really hyped about this massive map size and big MMO version of this medieval survival, in practice, there were issues. Spending 2 hours walking across grasslands and forests just to find the place that your mates had already chosen to settle. As the spawns were randomized, you'd often be spending hours and hours just trying to get to the right place. And it's not fun just walking around everywhere. It's not gameplay. It's kind of just a chore at that point. And then, of course, as I mentioned, you'd still just be mauled by a boar or a wolf whilst you're running across the map because you'd have no gear and you wouldn't really be able to outrun them. So you'd have to start your journey all over again. And whilst in Life is Feudal your own, that was kind of frustrating, in the MMO, because of the sheer scale of the map, it was rage quit inducing. And that came up over and over again with every aspect of the MMO. If it was kind of a pain, kind of annoying in Life is Feudal your own, because of the much bigger scale and the much more ambition that Bitbox had for the MMO version, it was multiplied over and over again. The insistence for this ultimate realism and hardcore survival ended up just growing tenfold for the MMO, making everything that was just a slight frustration in the first title become real game-hurting issues. But look, I'm just a YouTuber that plays historical games every now and then. In terms of MMOs, I have some experience, but still lacking somewhat. So I thought I would ask one of the leading YouTubers in MMO games, Josh Strife Hayes. I actually found his channel from his Life is Feudal MMO video, talking about its core issues, and whilst I actually loved Life is Feudal, and there is a lot of loyalty there for me because I have such a passion for that historical setting, every single one of the things he brought up really hit home. So I decided to ask him about it, what he really thought were the reasons of its downfall. I want to know what your thoughts on Life is Feudal, like a retrospective thought on Life is Feudal MMO now.
I like the idea, and I think this links back heavily to what we were saying earlier about how you need to find that balance between realism and fun. And I don't think they managed to find it correctly. I think they lent heavily into the realism without realizing that not enough people were going to find this fun. Life is Feudal your own is a great little simulator. There's a lot of good stuff there. There's a great amount of potential. That's a really fun little game. It's one of those games that likes to pride itself on not holding your hand. But I have a real issue with these games in that when anyone is learning anything, you need your hand to be held. When you are still a beginner in anything, I described it, I think, in the video as walking into a boxing ring after having never boxed before and saying to someone, hey, I want to learn how to box, and the instructor just punches you in the face. The MMO didn't have anything to do in the MMO beyond whatever the players created. And that sounds great. It sounds a really cool time. Yeah, sandbox. We call that sandbox design, where you can walk in and do whatever you want. It's the opposite of theme park design. But sandboxes rely on other players for stuff to do. And once other players leave, you then have less to do, so other people leave because there's less to do, so more people leave, and it's this death spiral that just goes down and down and down. And with an MMORPG, you need to appeal to a massive amount of people because they are massive projects, they are massive worlds, and they need a massive amount of money to succeed and to work and to keep going. So the problem with Life is Feudal was it did appeal to a demographic, but the demographic was not big enough to fill a world up enough with enough people to be enjoyable. Designers in their own mind think this is going to be great. This is going to be fantastic. It's going to be super hardcore. And they often forget that people don't want to come home from a hard day's work and do another hard day's work without seeing any progress. You need to find that middle balance where you are working in the MMO, but you also get to see the fruits of your labor within a believable and a realistic time frame. An MMORPG needs to be, at least on some level, solo friendly. They have this massive world with no reason to be as massive as it is. You say, okay, my land is going to be 1,000 square kilometers. I'm like, okay, cool. Where's the adventure? Where's the fun?
But
what are you going
why?
to put in this? Yeah, if you are making your world bigger for the sake of making it bigger, it's going to be relatively boring. If you're making it bigger because the amount of stuff is packed so densely, you literally can't contain any more adventure, that's awesome. The MMO needs to be an actual game in itself as well. It needs to be an RPG, an actual role-playing game with possibly a plot, possibly some stats to level, some things to go and do, a trackable progress that happens to be massive multiplayer and online. The RPG bit needs to be focused on much more than it is being, because if you look at all the successful MMOs, the ones that are making a load of money with a load of players, they're RPG games that happen to be online. Whereas you look at a lot of the MMOs that die, they are huge online worlds that try to contain some RPG.
And after all of this had gone on, players started to drop off, and with it a cycle continuing. As players drop off, the in-game economy started to slow down. Less people wanted to actually join and get on board with the game because they saw there weren't enough players in order to facilitate this massive world that was meant for thousands. Instead, there was hundreds, if not tens at some point. The developers saw this, and in some last-ditch attempt to get something out of it, they put in a hell of a lot of microtransactions, a subscription service in order to get premium items, being able to unlock skins, weapons, and hats, and it kind of just exacerbated the issue to the point where they completely killed the game. Then, just last year, we got the announcement that the servers would be completely shut down. The developers had decided that that was it. Enough was enough. And with Life is Feudal Your Own, whilst it is still up, because it's just its own game where players can host their own servers, that's fine. But with an MMO, if the players stop coming, the money stops rolling in. And once that happens, the servers that you need for an MMO are too expensive to be able to carry on running, so it's unfortunate that inevitably they get shut down. And that is what happened with Bitbox's Epic. They had this amazing idea, an idea that brought so many people in, including me. I was so excited, and I loved Life is Feudal Your Own. And yeah, I pushed some of its issues to the side because I just loved the core feeling when I actually played it with my friends, riding to war, working on projects, building castles and villages, and it was so much fun. And I guess Bitbox just bit off a little bit too much when they tried to make it into an MMO. But please, let me know what you think. Do you think Life is Feudal MMO could have worked, or like many, is it just one of those things that people think they can do, but in practice, it is just too much of an undertaking? Make sure you leave a comment down below. But hey, maybe we'll see something else in the future, something that has more resources and a bigger team behind it and really gets that balance between realism and actual fun gameplay right. Because like Josh Strife Hayes said, people don't want a second job. They want an actual fun game to play. And in my opinion, that sentence is the core reason that Life is Feudal the MMO died.